G'day, another year, another TGA. I just wanted to quickly go over the nominations and just give my thoughts on some of them. Not all the categories though, because I still think that best esports team, athlete, game, content creator of the year, most anticipated game, just fuck them all off, to be honest. Best mobile game because they're not real games. And I'd even argue maybe best adaptation don't necessarily need as a category. That would clean it up a lot. But anyway, let's start with best adaptation. I have only heard negative things about Minecraft, Season 2 of The Last of Us, and Until Dawn. But I will say with confidence, this is very clearly just the things that happened to be adapted from video games, because Devil May Cry is fucking awful. And not because it's not like the games. I don't care that it told a different story from the games and was a little bit different. That's fine. The version of this story that they wanted to tell, though, is just plain bad. I've heard some good things about Deathwatch, so maybe that's going to be the winner here. I just hope we don't have to deal with Jack Black actually rocking up in person to scream chicken jockey at the crowd. Best multiplayer, I'd personally go Arc Raiders, probably. I had a lot of fun with Peak. Battlefield 6, actually pretty meh. Like some parts of it are good. And although I had fun playing Split Fiction with my sister, I think Arc Raiders just feels like a really solid all-round experience in so many aspects. Best sports and racing, obviously you have your regular EA entries that just always get in. I will say though, Mario Kart World, not really a big fan of that. I played a little bit of it with my sister, and even after doing Rainbow Road, I said to her, I'd rather go back to Mario Kart 8. It's just a much better game overall, I find. No comment on Rematch or Sonic Racing. I watched some friends play Rematch and it looked very cool. Best Sim Strategy, still one of those categories that kind of is just thrown in there. It has this weird mixture of games that doesn't really take into account the big difference that comes between a simulation game versus a strategy game. Like, it's such a big gap of differences between certain games. Like, you look at Cities Skylines, but then you look at something like Age of Empires 4. Why would you pit those against each other as an example and try to figure out which of those games is the better sim/strategy? They really need to fix this category up, I reckon. Putting Monster Hunter into this one is a bit wild if you ask me. But even though I would say Clair Obscur is the pure winner and the best game out of the ones that are nominated, I would probably lean towards Kingdom Come being the better RPG experience, just because of how in-depth it is with its role-playing mechanics and what you can actually do in its world. And even though I don't like Avowed and I haven't played the Outer Worlds 2, I guess they could also make some sort of argument about how well they do role-playing. And there are RPG mechanics in Clair Obscur, but I guess it's a lack of role-playing, so it depends how much they try to stick to this idea of character customization and progression. Best action adventure, considering there's an action category, it'd be cool to see this change into just pure adventure or something, I guess. But either way, I really enjoyed Indiana Jones. I think that is a great game. I don't agree with Split Fiction getting nominated, and Death Stranding, Ghost, and Hollow Knight. Haven't played either of those, but I mean, everybody knows about the hype behind Silk Song, so I would just assume that's going to win. Best action game, I would imagine Hades 2 is probably going to win it. That's massively popular. I only hear good things about it. Doom the Dark Ages, I wouldn't have nominated it unless it launched with the fixes that they've done recently. So they did a big patch and they made the weapon swapping a little bit faster. Not to the same point that Doom Eternal is, but there was definitely an annoying part about that game is that the combat felt a little sluggish. You should have been able to sort of swap weapons a little bit more, and they have fixed that. Now it's a good game, but I think you should probably judge games on what they're like on release with these kind of awards. Otherwise, you imagine an okay game becoming great, later on in the year versus an okay game that launches towards the end of the year. It doesn't have the same time to really shine like that earlier release does. I've seen a lot of discussion with the word indie for these game awards, and I think it's a valid discussion to have because it should probably be changed to something along the lines of best self-published game, and especially with debut indie game. I heard Yahtzee in a Second Wind live stream talking about the Game Awards, saying that the award doesn't really make too much sense because it's a new studio, or it says here created by a new independent studio, but it's not necessarily new people in the industry. So should the award not actually go to highlighting new creators within the industry? And then, yeah, as I was saying before, best independent game. Most of the time games that are getting nominated aren't actually independent. They've received funding. In the case of Clair Obscur, I think the publisher is actually made up of other indie studios, but still it's external funding. It's not self-published. So the wording could be changed or whatever. It's not that big of a deal for me personally. I just think, the wording could do with a bit of an update. But in terms of, best debut indie and best independent game, it's got to be Clair Obscur because it's also up for the overall game of the year. But worth noting, even though I think Clair Obscur is probably the best game of this decade so far, I do think it's a bit unfortunate that there's a snub for this really, really good indie game called And Roger. Very short experience, but it is just really, really well made, and it's just such a really well told story. With best performance, I was actually thinking to myself, playing Clair Obscur, that surely there's going to be multiple nominations just from this game alone. And I was actually surprised to see Charlie Cox up for a nomination, not because he's undeserving. I thought him as Gustav was a really good performance, but personally, I would probably swap him out for Andy Serkis. Serkis just gives a really, really incredible performance as Renoir, and it's so unfortunate for so much good competition to be up against Troy Baker, who, he's definitely deserving of an award. He put in a great performance as Indy, but he's also put in great performances as other characters in the past and just never won an award for his acting. Kanatsu Kato, if that's how it's pronounced, I thought she was really good in Silent Hill F. You don't really get much from her at first, but then you get to see more of her performance, and the more you see of the character, her performance is actually one of the standout things about that game, even though I didn't really like it. Overall, I personally would go with Ben Starr. I won't spoil any scenes in particular, but he had some very, very strong scenes and just gave a brilliant performance. I would love to see him win the award. One person I think kind of got snubbed though. I don't know much about Erica's performance in Ghost of Yotei, so I can't comment on that. Maybe I would swap out Charlie Cox for Marios Gavrilis, I think it's pronounced, who played Emmerich Voss in Indiana Jones. He was spot on, just super charismatic, but at the same time really sleazy, but also demanded your attention in this really, really awesome way. It was just a joy. Every time he was on the screen, you just knew you were going to get a great scene, because he's also just written very, very well. So he's got that real scary side about him as a villain, but there's intrigue because he's also an archaeologist, and they still managed to have that goofy sort of klutz way of going about some scenes, very much in line with the original trilogy. So yeah, massive props to him. He did a wonderful job. It's a shame Arc Raiders wasn't nominated for Best Audio Design, because even just playing a small bit of that lately, you can tell instantly there's just so much work put into making the audio as good as possible. The way you can pinpoint directions of footsteps and everything reminds me a little bit of playing Tarkov for the first time back in the early days, where it just had a soundscape that was unlike anything else. I will say though, Battlefield 6, sure, it sounds fucking hectic at times on the battlefield. Silent Hill F though, I think would be my pick personally. With best score on music, I'm actually surprised Silent Hill F didn't get a nomination. I thought the music in that game was fucking brilliant. It just really stood out to me. And not because I thought a lot of other aspects of the game were bad and that was the only good thing. I think it's just genuinely really, really good. But either way, I really hope the award goes to Lorian. He just put out one of the top 10 soundtracks of all time for me. I think the Clair Obscur soundtrack is just pure brilliance. Best art direction, again, bit of a snub for Silent Hill F. I think that game with its contrasting sort of red flowery aesthetic against the gloomy backdrop of the town, it just looks really beautiful at times. And even though I'm not that big of a fan of the other world, I do think it looks really, really pretty. I feel like all these games just look amazing in their own way though. I would lean towards Clair Obscur personally, but it's not like you have any bad games here up for it. If I could, I would probably put Keeper in this category and maybe even vote for it to win if I could. That game is very, very beautiful. It's such a joy to look at, especially on an OLED. This is definitely one area I think Silent Hill F probably could have done with a bit of a snubbing and ignore it. There are aspects of the narrative that are good and well written, but there's just so many notes that are so on the fucking nose with no hint of subtlety at all. And there's also the issue where to get the actual full story, you need to do multiple playthroughs of the campaign. And the game sort of has an issue where it's not exactly a fun time going through the first playthrough, or at least it wasn't for me. There'll be more thoughts about this when I do my completed games video. But yeah, overall, when the game's not that fun to play the first time, it's a bit much to ask for 3 more playthroughs just for the game to finally deliver you the rest of the content in terms of narrative. Not a fan. Either way, Clair Obscur, it's got to be the winner. It is just packed with so many great emotional moments. It's full of intrigue. It keeps you guessing all the way through. And it just really benefits from a second playthrough like no other game that I've played. There are just so many amazing pieces of story that are right there in the open. It just doesn't make sense the first time around. And all the character interactions and everything, the characters just feel so real. It's just such a brilliantly written game, and the way the story plays out, it's just fantastic. With best game direction, I would give it to Clair Obscur as well, just for a lot of the reasons I mentioned with like the narrative and everything. Just how the game is put together in general is just so perfect. Split Fiction being nominated, no. The best that game gets is towards the end of it, where the two worlds actually start crossing over and merging. And then it genuinely becomes really interesting. It has some great set pieces, but it's like the final hour of the game, if that. So by that point, for me personally, the game was kind of boring, and it's not very well written. The dialogue in particular is kind of crap. And finally, Game of the Year, it will 100% be Clair Obscur. I'm declaring it now. If not, then I think the plan will be to riot somewhere. I don't know. Yeah, the game is just, it is just special. So special. I wish I could play it for the first time again. So that's it for TGA 2025. There's a couple of categories I skipped. I just didn't really have much to say on them. Really, always looking forward to the orchestra that will play all the soundtracks from these Game of the Year nominees. That's going to sound absolutely brilliant, I'm sure. Definitely some snubs that I think could have been overlooked just because the jury that are sort of voting for these things are probably mostly leaning towards more of the popular games. You know, it would have been nice to see And Roger up here nominated for something. I think that game really is brilliant. But yeah, what can you do? Definitely a year with some brilliant games. I'm sure we'll get some really cool trailers as well. Just looking forward to the show in general. So that's enough rambling from me. Until the next video, have a good one.